First, when the Queensland government was reported to be seriously thinking about Aboriginalising the name of Brisbane to Meanjin in time for the Olympic Games, you've got to wonder about the green left wave now breaking over Australia. Now, yes, the Premier has now since tried to hose it all down, but you can see where this is headed. We've had wall-to-wall Labor governments before, in 2008, for instance, but in those days, Labor governments were more interested in putting money into workers' pockets than in social engineering. And that's because, by and large, it was the right faction of Labor with the numbers, not the left. Well, not anymore. Those days, with the left in charge, are here with us now. It's climate change, identity politics, and universal free access to abortion and assisted suicide. Green left Labor has moved beyond economic change to want to change the way we live, to change the way we think, and to radically change our country. Consider the Labor measures that are in the news just today. There's the ACT government's move to offer euthanasia to people as young as 14 who aren't necessarily in imminent danger of death. This is on top of the forced acquisition, without compensation, of the Catholic-owned and run Calvary Hospital. The Green Left Labor government has long been gunning for Calvary because it doesn't perform abortions on demand, even though the government-run Canberra Hospital doesn't do them either, preferring to leave this to private clinics in the ACT. And now, having taken over Calvary, the ACT government is looking at a compulsory takeover of the Canberra's Clare Holland Hospice, currently also Catholic-run, presumably so that gravely ill people there might have easier access to doctor-assisted suicide rather than the palliative care the Clare Holland Hospice is renowned for. But these examples aside, look at the other examples by the hard left's push in the media today, best typified by the proposals being put up to Labor's National Conference in August. There's a proposal to pay the fees of women who have abortions in private clinics and to pay the transport and accommodation costs of women who need to travel for abortions. There's a demand to close down the Boat People Processing Centre in Nauru, even though the Rudd government's earlier decision to do so helped trigger the wave of boats that ultimately brought 50,000 illegal arrivals to our shores the last time Labor was in power, plus well over 1,000 deaths at sea. There's also a demand that childcare be absolutely free, as opposed to now heavily subsidised, for families earning up to $500,000 a year. $500,000, if you can believe it. There's a demand too from the Labor left that the Albanese government rescinds the AUKUS deal to get nuclear submarines signed off by the Morrison government, but fully supported too by the Albanese opposition. Now, not all of these proposals will be adopted immediately by the Albanese government, but the direction of travel is obvious, isn't it? And it's worth reminding viewers that Labor's National Conference resolutions are binding. They form part of the party's official platform, and they lock every MP into voting for them, whether they agree or not. Now, on the Liberal side, resolutions at National Conference, well, they're merely expressing the will of party delegates in the room. They're not binding in any way, because Liberal MPs always retain their right to individual freedom of thought and action where they disagree with the party line. 12 months on from the election, the Albanese government is turning out to be by far the most left-wing government in our history. It's not just spending more and taxing higher, it's an assault on the idea that every Australian has a right to control the borders and to deny entry to people who don't meet our criteria for entry. It's a rejection of the idea that life is sacred, with a preference for preserving it, not ending it, given our once universal commitment to help people in extremis because we value them and we value life. Well, not so anymore. And it's a new reluctance to defend our country, because some of us have been browbeaten into this lie that we stole it from Aboriginal people and have no real right to be here. Hence this rush, via the Voice, to give Aboriginal people a special say in how we're governed, over and above the rest of us, that will create two classes of citizen and entrench race at the heart of our nation's rulebook. Yes, it was all about safe change, we were told, before Albanese won the election. All he wanted to change, he reassured us then, was just the person in the lodge. But now everything's going to change if Labor has its way. Now, I'm not saying that people can't hold these views in a free country. I'm just saying that what the Green Left Labor has in mind for us is a cultural revolution, an Australia utterly unlike that of a generation back, when families had the main responsibility for looking after children and grandparents, when schools and other institutions reinforced respect for the country we'd always been, welcoming and solid, never more so, never more free, fair and proud. Now, I know that there's also analysis out today from someone attached to the Centre for Independent Studies claiming that the Liberal Party is demographically doomed because the young are much more green left than ever before and failing to become more conservative as they get older, which was, of course, once the case. To which I have two responses. First, what can you expect when schools have been brainwashing kids for a generation with a black armband view of Australia? And second, what can you expect when weak Liberals have failed to tackle the problems in schools or more robustly stood up for Australia in the Parliament or more generally out and about in our community? Now, you and I know, don't we, that an Australia that's further sapped by this Green Left Labor push will be poorer, weaker, more fragmented and ultimately much more miserable because the love of family has been replaced by the uncertain care of an increasingly larger and more interfering state, with the threat of a needle hanging over the lives of the old and the wretched. Now, if this appalls you as it appalls me, there's one thing we can do about it to try and stop this runaway train. And that's to finally give the Green Left some pushback, to hit them with a rejection of their new design for Australia. And the only way they'll understand, ballot box politics. For too long, ordinary Australians have not had much of a say. So much of this has happened by stealth. Well, not anymore. Not anymore. Coming soon is the vote on the voice. This is your chance to start to get your country back. It's not just about race and the Constitution. It's about everything else too. So please, vote no. Let's start to take our country back from the people who basically despise it and want to change Australia beyond recognition.